My parents treat me like outdated furniture, hiding me away whenever their elite in-laws visit. To them, I am just a muddy disgrace, a lowly gardener unworthy of my perfect sister. Yet they have no idea that the $100 million estate they are currently worshiping would be nothing but a sinking swamp without my so-called dirty hands. While they tremble in fear, the powerful woman they are desperate to impress is actually waiting to embrace me. My name is Kiara Winterbourne, and at 29 years old, I have learned that silence is often the loudest form of rebellion. I sat at the mahogany dining table, the surface of which was currently covered in topographic maps and soil composition charts. The late afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating the graphite dust that stained my fingertips. To anyone else, these papers represented a complex hydrological system for a high-altitude terrace. To my parents, they were just dirty scraps of paper that cluttered their pristine, staged-for-guests existence. I did not need to look up to know that my parents, Richard and Catherine Winterbourne, had entered the room. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees, sucking the warmth out of the air. Their footsteps were deliberate, rhythmic, and heavy with judgment. I continued to shade a section of the elevation plan, keeping my hand steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "Kiara," my father said. His voice was a flat line, devoid of affection, carrying the tone of a CEO addressing a redundant employee. I finally lifted my head. My father stood tall, his suit immaculate, not a single thread out of place, beside him. My mother looked like a porcelain doll that had been preserved in a vacuum-sealed bag, perfect. Frozen, and utterly terrifying. They were not looking at my face. They were looking at my hands. Specifically, at the faint traces of soil trapped beneath my short, unpolished fingernails and the charcoal smudges on my skin. "Mother, Father," I acknowledged them, setting my pencil down. "Is something wrong?" "We need to discuss the weekend," my mother said, her lips barely moving. She smoothed the front of her designer dress, a nervous tic she had developed whenever she had to deal with something unpleasant. And to her, I was always something unpleasant. Specifically, Serena's engagement party. I nodded slowly. The party at the Glass Horizon. I know. It is the social event of the season. "It is more than just a social event, Kiara," my father interrupted, stepping closer to the table. He looked down at my blueprints with a sneer, as if the mere presence of technical drawings was an insult to his lineage. "It is the unification of the Winterbourne family with the Montgomery dynasty. It is the culmination of everything your mother and I have worked for. It is critical that everything goes perfectly. I am happy for Serena," I said. And surprisingly, I meant it. In a twisted way, I was happy she had found someone who could afford her lifestyle. "I assume you are here to discuss the logistics of the ride over." My parents exchanged a look. It was a look I knew well. It was the look they gave each other when they had to put the family dog down, or when they fired the housekeeper for chipping a crystal glass. "Actually," my father said, clasping his hands behind his back, "we are here to tell you that you will not be attending." The room went silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the seconds of my exclusion. I did not blink. I did not cry. I simply looked at them. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice steady. "It is for the best. Kiara," my mother added quickly, her voice pitching up an octave. "You have to understand our position. The Montgomerys are elite, old money. They value sophistication, presentation, pedigree. And I am a Winterbourne," I said. "Am I not?" "You are," my father said, his voice hardening. "By blood, yes. But look at you." He gestured vaguely at my attire, a comfortable linen shirt and tailored trousers. Practical for my line of work, but evidently offensive to his sensibilities. "You look like the help. Kiara, you work with dirt, you dig holes, you spend your days sweating under the sun with laborers. I am a landscape architect," I corrected him quietly. "You are a gardener." He spat the word out like a curse. "Let us not dress it up with fancy titles. You play in the mud, and frankly, your hands are rough. Your skin is sun-damaged. You do not have the polish required for an event of this magnitude. If you were to stand next to Serena at the glass horizon, people would talk. They would wonder why the Winterbourne family allowed one of their daughters to fall so low. I looked down at my hands. They were strong hands, dexterous, capable of reshaping the earth and coaxing life from barren rock. They were hands that built ecosystems. To my father, they were just evidence of failure. So I am to be hidden, I stated, like a crack in the wall. We are just protecting the family image, my mother insisted, though she refused to meet my eyes. The Montgomerys judge everything. If they see you, looking like this, they might think we are not of their caliber. We cannot risk Serena's future just so you can eat free canapes. Before I could respond, the sound of heels clicking rapidly against the hardwood floor announced the arrival of the golden child. Serena breezed into the room. A vision in silk and diamonds. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but it was a beauty that required constant maintenance and validation. She held a dress bag in one hand and a glass of green juice in the other. "Are you telling her?" Serena asked, not even looking at me. She addressed our parents as if I were a piece of furniture that was being discussed for auction. "We are explaining the situation," my father said, his voice instantly softening. Serena turned to me then, a pitying smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Kiara, don't look so tragic. Honestly, you would hate it there. It is going to be incredibly stuffy, high society, art talk, politics, not exactly your crowd. You would just be standing in the corner awkwardly while everyone else discusses things that actually matter." "Things that matter," I repeated. "Like shoes and gossip." Serena laughed, a tinkling, practice sound. "See, you are bitter already. Look, sis, just do us a favor. Stay home, order a pizza, watch some reality TV. Enjoy the air conditioning. Do not come and pollute the atmosphere at the glass horizon with your earthy vibe. The Montgomerys are expecting royalty, not the groundskeeping crew." She leaned in closer, her perfume overpowering the scent of my graphite pencils. "Besides, I heard the security at the glass horizon is extremely strict. It would be so embarrassing for you to be turned away at the gate because you do not fit the dress code. We are just saving you the humiliation." My father checked his watch, a gold timepiece that cost more than most people's cars. "It is settled then. We will tell anyone who asks that you are under the weather, a migraine, or perhaps a viral infection, something that explains why you are isolated. We are leaving in 1 hour," my mother said, her relief palpable now that the dirty deed was done. "Serena, darling, let us go check your hair. I think the stylist missed a strand on the left." "Coming. Mommy?" Serena chirped. She gave me one last wave, a dismissal disguised as a farewell. "Have a fun night in. Kiara, don't wait up." They swept out of the room, leaving a vacuum of silence in their wake. I sat there for a long moment, listening to their voices fade down the hallway. I looked back down at my drawings. My father had called me a gardener. Serena had called me the groundskeeping crew. They thought they were banishing me from a palace. A dry, cold laugh bubbled up in my chest, but I suppressed it. It would not do to laugh alone in an empty room. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. They were going to the glass horizon. They were going to marvel at the suspended aquatic gardens. They were going to gasp at the way the structural integrity of the cliffside estate seemed to defy gravity. They were going to worship the architecture that blended seamlessly with the natural rock formations. And they had absolutely no idea that the gardener they had just forbidden from attending was the one who had saved that building from sliding into the ocean. They knew nothing of Aetherist dynamics. To them, I was just a freelancer who scraped by. They did not know that Aetherist was the world's leading bioarchitecture firm. They did not know that K2W, the mysterious lead architect whose name was whispered with reverence in industry circles, was sitting right here at their dining table. They saw dirt on my hands and assumed poverty. They did not understand that when you operate at my level, you get your hands dirty because you do not trust anyone else to touch the foundation. My parents were chasing status. They were desperate to be associated with the Montgomerys, but the Montgomery matriarch, Evelyn Montgomery, did not care about their social climbing. She cared about results, and I was the only reason her family legacy was still standing. I slowly gathered my maps and rolled them up. Securing them with a rubber band, I placed my pencils back into their case. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the driveway. I saw the chauffeur preparing the limousine. I saw my father pacing, shouting into his phone. I saw Serena twirling, practicing her poses for the paparazzi. They looked so small from here. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a secure line, a number that very few people possessed. I pulled it out and saw the caller ID. It was the private executive line for the Montgomery estate. I swiped the screen to answer, bringing the phone to my ear. "This is Kiara," I said, my voice dropping the deferential tone I used with my parents. "Ms. Winterbourne." A crisp, professional voice answered. It was Evelyn Montgomery's personal assistant. "I am calling to confirm your arrival time for this evening. Mrs. Montgomery is quite anxious to ensure everything is perfect for the unveiling. She wanted to personally ensure that you have the access codes for the VIP entrance." I watched my parents get into the limousine. My father was adjusting his tie in the side mirror. My mother was fixing Serena's train. They looked like actors taking their places on a stage, completely unaware that the script had already been rewritten. "Ms. Winterbourne," the assistant asked, sensing my hesitation, "are you still attending?" I watched the limousine pull out of the driveway, the taillights fading into the twilight. They had told me to stay home. They had told me I was a disgrace. They had told me I would pollute the air. "Yes," I said, a slow smile finally breaking across my face. It was not a nice smile. "Please tell Mrs. Montgomery that I will be there, and tell her I'm looking forward to inspecting the final product." "Excellent," the assistant replied. "We have reserved the private suite for you to prepare. Your attire has been delivered as requested. We await your presence, ma'am." I hung up the phone. The house was quiet. My parents thought they had left their shame behind. They thought they had hidden the stain on their reputation. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at my reflection. I saw the smudges of graphite on my cheek. I saw the unkempt hair. But beneath that, I saw the eyes of the woman who owned the ground they were about to walk on. I was not going to the glass horizon as Kiara Winterbourne. The disappointment. I was going as Kay, the creator. And tonight, for the first time in my life, I was not going to hide in the garden. I was going to own it. I turned away from the mirror and headed toward the stairs. I had work to do, and unlike my family, who needed hours to mask their insecurities with makeup and jewels, I only needed to wash my hands. The rest would take care of itself. The gardener was coming to the party, and she was bringing the storm with her. As I stood in the silent hallway, the echo of the front door slamming shut seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, shaking loose the dust of memories I had long tried to sweep under the rug. The silence of the house was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and familiar. It was the same silence that had wrapped around me for 29 years, a constant reminder of the invisible wall that ran right down the center of this family. My childhood was not marked by screams or raised fists. There were no bruises to photograph, no broken bones to set. The cruelty of the Winterbourne household was far more insidious. It was a cruelty of omission, of absence, of a cold and calculated indifference that hurts more than a slap ever could. I walked slowly into the living room, my fingers trailing over the velvet upholstery of the armchair, a chair no one was allowed to sit in because it was for display only. That chair was a perfect metaphor for my sister, Serena. From the moment she could walk, she was the porcelain doll in the glass cabinet. She was kept indoors, away from the sun that might freckle her skin, away from the wind that might tangle her hair. She was groomed, polished, and positioned for the highest bidder. I, on the other hand, was the weed that grew through the cracks in the patio, while Serena was having tea parties with imaginary dukes in the climate-controlled nursery. I was in the backyard, knees deep in the mud, fascinated by the way water moved through the soil. I collected rocks. I studied root systems. I built intricate dams in the gutter when it rained. I found beauty in the chaos of nature, in the raw, unpolished reality of the earth. To my parents, this was not curiosity, it was a defect. The divide became a canyon when I turned 16. I remember that day with a clarity that still stings. It was the state science fair. I had spent 6 months designing a sustainable irrigation system for arid climates. It was ugly, industrial, and brilliant. I had welded the pipes myself in the school shop. I had calculated the flow rates until I could recite them in my sleep. I won first place. The judges, actual engineers from the city, shook my hand and told me I had a gift. I stood on that stage, clutching a blue ribbon and a certificate, scanning the audience for 2 specific faces. The auditorium was packed with proud parents flashing cameras and cheering. But in the row reserved for the Winterborns, there were only 2 empty seats. When I got home that evening, bursting with a desperate need to show them the ribbon, to prove that I was worth something, I found them in the living room. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. Serena was standing on the coffee table, shoes and all modeling a lavender silk gown. "Look at the drape, Richard," my mother was saying, her eyes shining with a pride I had never seen directed at me. "It is perfect for the senator's gala. She looks like a princess." "Worth every penny," my father agreed, sipping his drink. "An investment." I stood in the doorway, the blue ribbon crumpling in my sweating hand. "I won," I said. My voice was small, swallowed by the room. They turned to look at me, their expressions shifting from adoration to mild annoyance, as if a beggar had interrupted a private dinner. "Oh, that is nice. Kiara," my mother said, barely glancing at the ribbon. "Please do not bring that contraption inside. It smells like rust. And go wash up. We are celebrating Serena's debut preparation." That was the moment the truth finally settled in my bones, in the ledger of the Winterborn family legacy. Serena was the asset, the high-yield bond expected to marry well and elevate our social standing. I was the bad debt. I was the liability. I was the awkward, dirt-stained variable they could not control and therefore did not want to acknowledge. I tried one last time, a year later, to explain my passion to them. I sat them down and showed them brochures for landscape architecture programs. I spoke about the intersection of ecology and design, about how shaping the land was the oldest form of art. My mother laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Architecture. You mean gardening, Kiara. You want to be a glorified laborer. You want to spend your life sweating alongside illegal immigrants and men with calloused hands. We did not raise a Winterborn to play in the dirt. It is beneath us." "It is engineering," I argued. "It is art. It is manual labor," my father finalized. "And we will not pay for you to embarrass us." That refusal was the greatest gift they ever gave me. It severed the cord. I moved out 3 days after my high school graduation. I did not take their money. I did not take their connections. I rented a studio apartment the size of a closet in a neighborhood where the police sirens were a nightly lullaby. I waited tables double shifts. I ate instant noodles for dinner 5 nights a week. I paid my own tuition, bought my own books, and when my boots wore out, I taped them together until I could afford new ones. While I was building a backbone of steel, Serena was learning the art of weaponized helplessness. She called me sometimes, usually when she needed something she could not charm a man into doing. She would cry about how hard her life was, how exhausted she was from fittings and luncheons. She used her fragility like a currency. If she acted incapable, someone else would do the work for her. She drained our parents' bank accounts for essentials that cost more than my tuition. She consumed everything around her attention, money, energy, and gave back nothing but a pretty smile. I stopped answering her calls. I stopped going home for holidays. I buried myself in my work. In the world of construction and design, the name Winterborn meant nothing. In fact, it was a hindrance. It sounded too soft, too pampered. So I killed Kiara Winterborn in her place. K.W. was born. I started taking the jobs no one else wanted, the sites with impossible drainage issues, the luxury estates that were sliding off cliffs because the original architects cared more about aesthetics than geology. I became a ghost in the industry. I wore hard hats and steel-toed boots. I learned to speak the language of the contractors, the excavators, the masons. I earned their respect not with a checkbook, but by standing in the mud with them at 3 a.m. during a storm, directing the flow of water to save a foundation. Rumors began to circulate about KW. They said I was a hermit. They said I was a wizard who could talk to the earth. They said I could fix the unfixable. I let them talk. I hid behind my initials. I let my work speak so loudly that I did not have to say a word. I saved billion-dollar projects from environmental collapse. I turned swampy nightmares into award-winning eco-sanctuaries. I charged exorbitant fees, and people paid them without blinking because I was the only one who could deliver. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror again. The lighting was dim, but I saw clearly. The frightened 16-year-old girl with the crumpled blue ribbon was gone. The woman staring back at me was not a gardener. She was a master of her craft. I was the CEO of my own life. I had built myself from the ground up, layer by painful layer, just like the terraces I designed. My parents saw dirt on my hands and thought it was shame. They did not understand that soil is the source of all life. It is the foundation. It is the only thing that lasts. Tonight, I was going to walk into the glass horizon not as their daughter, but as the architect of their salvation. I touched the scar on my palm, a souvenir from a jagged piece of rebar 5 years ago. It was a reminder of what was real. Their world of cocktails and gossip was fragile. My world was made of stone, steel, and roots. I turned away from the mirror. I had a shower to take and a couture gown to put on. The irony was delicious. They had spent a fortune trying to buy their way into high society. I had simply built the stage they were desperate to stand on. And tonight, the curtain was finally going to rise. 3 months before the night of the party, while my parents were busy debating which napkin folds would best impress the elite, the Montgomery Empire was quietly and catastrophically sinking. The glass horizon was not just a home, it was a statement. Perched on the jagged cliffs of the Hudson Valley, it was a modernist marvel of steel and glass that seemed to float above the river. It was the physical manifestation of the Montgomery family's power, bold, transparent, and seemingly untouchable. But beneath the polished marble floors and the soaring atriums, geology was waging a war that money could not bribe. Evelyn Montgomery stood in the center of the great hall, her heels clicking nervously on the Italian stone. She was a woman who commanded boardrooms with a raised eyebrow, but today, her hands were trembling. A deep, jagged fissure had appeared in the north foundation wall overnight. It was a scar running through the heart of her legacy. "Tell me this is a cosmetic issue," Evelyn demanded, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. The team of engineers standing before her looked like condemned men. They were the best in the state, wearing hard hats that cost more than my first car. But they were useless against the shifting tectonic reality. "Mrs. Montgomery," the lead structural engineer stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It is not cosmetic. The shale shelf beneath the north wing is destabilizing. The heavy rains last month saturated the clay layer. The entire cliffside is shifting. If we do not stabilize it, the north wing, the ballroom, could slide into the river within 6 months." 6 months? Evelyn's face went pale. "The engagement gala is in 3 months. The Global Economic Summit is 2 weeks after that. We have senators, ambassadors, and half of Wall Street coming to this house. Are you telling me I have to cancel? To fix this properly, we would need to underpin the entire foundation," another engineer added. "It would take a year, minimum. We would have to close the estate, bring in heavy drilling equipment. It would be a construction zone." "Impossible," Evelyn snapped. "Canceling is an admission of weakness. The Montgomery stock would plummet if rumors got out that our flagship property is literally falling apart. I need a solution. Now." The room fell into a heavy silence. These men were experts at building up, not holding things together that wanted to fall apart. "There might be one person," a voice spoke up from the back. It was Marcus, Evelyn's oldest advisor and the only man who dared to offer her bad news without flinching. "But she is unconventional. I do not care if she is a witch doctor," Evelyn said. "Can she fix it?" "She runs a firm called Etherius Dynamics," Marcus said, pulling up a file on his tablet. "They specialize in bioarchitectural remediation. Basically, they use nature to fight nature. Her name is Kay. No one knows her full name. She's expensive, she is difficult, and she only takes jobs she finds interesting." "Get her," Evelyn ordered. "Pay her whatever she wants. Just get her here." 48 hours later, I drove my beat-up truck past the security gates of the Glass Horizon. The guards looked at my vehicle caked in mud from a wetland restoration project I had just finished with open disdain, but they had their orders. They waved me through. I parked next to a row of pristine luxury sedans. I stepped out, wearing my signature sight gear heavy boots, cargo pants with reinforced knees, and a black turtleneck. My hair was tied back in a severe bun. I carried no briefcase, only a ruggedized tablet and a laser distance measurer. Evelyn Montgomery was waiting for me on the terrace. She was intimidating, radiating the kind of icy authority that usually made people stutter. She watched me approach, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She expected a suit. She got a worker. "You are Kate?" she asked, skepticism dripping from her voice. "I am," I said, skipping the pleasantries. I walked past her, straight to the edge of the terrace where the fissure was visible. I did not ask for permission. I dropped to one knee and placed my hand on the stone. I could feel the vibration of the river below, the subtle groan of the earth under the immense weight of the house. "Your engineers want to pour more concrete," I said, standing up. "That is a mistake. The shale is fractured. Concrete adds weight. Weight is your enemy right now. You are trying to anchor a ship to a crumbling dock." Evelyn blinked. "They suggested micropiling." "Micropiling will shatter the shale further," I countered. "You are fighting the cliff. You need to work with it." I pulled out my tablet and brought up the geological surveys I had hacked into ER, accessed on my way over. I projected a 3D hologram of the cliffside into the air between us. Evelyn's eyes widened. "The water table is too high," I explained, pointing to the blue veins running through the digital rock. "The hydrostatic pressure is pushing the cliff face outward. You don't need more steel. You need to relieve the pressure." "And how do we do that without tearing the house down?" Evelyn asked, her skepticism replaced by intense curiosity. "We don't fight the water," I said. "We invite it in." I swiped the screen, overlaying my design onto the existing structure. We bore horizontal drainage channels deep into the cliff face, beneath the foundation, but instead of hiding them, we exposed them. We turned the retaining wall into a massive, vertical hydroponic garden. The roots of specific high-absorbency plants will act as a living net, stabilizing the soil while sucking up the excess moisture. We channel the runoff into a series of cascading pools that act as counterweights to the structural lean. I looked her in the eye. We turn the structural failure into the centerpiece of the estate, a hanging garden that holds the house up. It will be stronger than concrete, and it will be breathtaking. Evelyn stared at the hologram. She looked at the fissure in the ground. Then she looked at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of respect in her steel-gray eyes. "It sounds insane," she said softly. "Turning a landslide into a garden." "It is biomimicry," I corrected. "Nature has been keeping cliffs standing for millions of years. We just need to borrow her engineering." "And the timeline?" she asked. 3 months, I said. "If you give me total control, no committees, no second guessing, I bring my own crew. We work 24 hours a day. And I stay anonymous. I do not do press releases." Evelyn studied me. She was a gambler at heart, a woman who had built an empire by taking risks everyone else was too afraid to touch. She saw something in me, perhaps a mirror of her own relentless drive. My son is getting engaged here in 3 months, she said. If this fails, my family becomes a laughingstock. If you do nothing, your family falls into the Hudson River. I replied calmly. Evelyn extended her hand. It was manicured, adorned with a diamond ring the size of a walnut. I took it with my rough, calloused hand. Do it, she said. Save my house, KW, and name your price. Double the standard rate, I said without missing a beat, and complete autonomy. Done, she agreed. Just get to work. She had no idea. As she shook my hand, she had absolutely no idea that she was making a deal with the sister of the girl who was about to marry her son. She did not see Kiara Winterbourne, the gardener. She saw KW, the savior. I walked away from her, my mind already racing with calculations. The irony was intoxicating. My parents had banned me from this house because they thought I was not good enough to walk on its floors. Now, I was the only reason those floors would still be there. I was going to save their precious stage, and I was going to do it with the very mud they despised. I pulled out my phone and dialed my foreman. Get the crew, I said. We have a job, and bring the heavy drills. We are going to perform surgery on a castle. The next 90 days were not measured in hours or minutes, but in the relentless rhythm of jackhammers and the grinding roar of diamond-tipped drills. The glass horizon ceased to be a home and became a battlefield where my army of 300 engineers, botanists, and laborers waged war against gravity. I did not sleep in a bed for the first 3 weeks. I napped in 20-minute intervals on a cot in the temporary command center we had erected in the East Wing, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled of ozone and wet concrete. My parents believed that high society was built on silk and polite conversation. They were wrong. It is built on steel, sweat, and the ability to solve problems that money alone cannot fix. The transformation was violent before it was beautiful. To save the mansion, we had to wound it. We stripped away the Italian marble cladding on the north face to expose the raw, trembling shale beneath. My crew worked in shifts that rotated around the clock, turning the silent nights of the Hudson Valley into a symphony of industry. We bored 12 massive horizontal shafts into the cliff face, each one over 50 feet deep, acting as the new skeletal structure for the estate. I was everywhere at once. One moment I was strapped into a harness dangling 60 feet above the river, inspecting the weld points on the titanium anchors. The next, I was in the makeshift laboratory, testing the pH levels of the nutrient solution for the hydroponic system. I stopped being Kiara Winterbourne entirely. I was simply the architect. My face was perpetually hidden behind safety goggles, a respirator, or the tinted visor of a welding helmet. My hands were stained with grease and chlorophyll, a combination that would have made my mother faint. But amidst the chaos, a strange quietude began to form between Evelyn Montgomery and me. She was not the distant check writer I had expected. She was there every morning at 6 o'clock, wearing a hard hat over her impeccable blowout, clutching a thermos of black coffee. She watched us with a hawk-like intensity. At first, I thought she was micromanaging, waiting for us to fail. But as the weeks ground on, I realized she was learning. One rainy Tuesday, about halfway through the project, the main hydraulic pump for the lower terrace seized up. Mud began to backfill into the filtration system. It was a crisis that could have set us back 2 weeks. I was in the mud pit, knee-deep in sludge, wrenching a rusted valve open with sheer brute force while my foreman shouted pressure readings. When I finally cleared the blockage and climbed out, dripping with brown slime, Evelyn was standing there. She did not recoil. She handed me a towel. Most architects I hire send their assistants to do the dirty work, she observed, her voice cutting through the rain. I wiped the muck from my face, leaving streaks of dirt on my skin. You did not hire me to draw pretty pictures. Mrs. Montgomery, you hired me to hold your house up. I cannot feel the tension in the pipes from a desk. She looked at the massive, skeletal framework of the vertical garden that was beginning to take shape. You tackle problems head on, no excuses. No deflection, she paused, her gaze turning inward. My son is a good man. But he has never had to fight for anything. He has never had mud on his hands. Sometimes I worry that if the foundation of his life ever cracked, he wouldn't know how to hold a wrench. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from the Iron Lady of New York. In that mud pit, we were equals. Two women who understood the burden of holding up an empire. She began to consult me on things outside the scope of the construction lighting choices. The flow of guests for the party, the acoustics of the ballroom. She valued my opinion because she knew it was forged in reality, not fluff. However, the bubble of our professional camaraderie was nearly punctured the week before completion. My parents and Serena arrived for a surprise inspection. I was up on a scaffolding rig in the main atrium, adjusting the irrigation nozzles for the moss wall that now spanned 3 stories. The system was designed to breathe, filtering the air and regulating the humidity of the entire house. From my vantage point, 30 feet in the air, I saw the limousine pull up. Panic is not an emotion I indulge in, but my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was trapped. If I climbed down, I would run right into them. If I stayed up, I was a sitting duck. I quickly signaled to my foreman, a burly man named Dave who knew the situation. To cut the lift power, I pulled my hood up, secured my respirator mask tightly over my face, and turned my back to the entrance, pretending to weld a joint that was already finished. "Oh my God, it is so loud!" Serena's voice drifted up, shrill and complaining, cutting through the hum of the ventilation fans. "And the dust. Mom, I cannot breathe. This is going to ruin my pores before the wedding." I watched them through the mesh of the scaffolding floor. Serena was wearing white, a foolish choice for a construction site. She stepped gingerly over a coil of cable as if it were a venomous snake. My parents trailed behind her, their noses wrinkled in distaste. Evelyn met them in the foyer. Her demeanor shifted instantly. The warmth she showed me vanished, replaced by the polite, icy mask of the hostess. "The work is in its final stages," Evelyn explained, her voice cool. "The dust will be gone in 48 hours. It looks like a war zone," my father grumbled, kicking at a drop cloth. "Are you sure this greenery is appropriate? It looks a bit wild, unrefined. We expected something more classical. Columns, gold leaf." "We are aiming for timeless, Richard, not gaudy," Evelyn replied sharply. "This system is a technological marvel. It is saving the estate." "Well, I just hope these workers are vetted," my mother added, clutching her purse tighter as a worker walked past with a heavy crate. "They look so rough. I mean, look at that one up there." She pointed a manicured finger directly at me. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. "Hanging off the ceiling like a monkey," my mother continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "I hope they scrub the place down with bleach after they leave. You cannot have Serena's guests mingling in a space that has been touched by people like that." My grip on the welding torch tightened until my knuckles turned white inside my gloves. People like that. Her own daughter. The daughter whose tuition she refused to pay. The daughter whose rough hands were currently the only thing preventing the roof from collapsing on her empty head. I waited for Evelyn to appease them, to apologize for the mess. But she didn't. Evelyn looked up at me. She could not see my face. Only the dark visor of my helmet and the silhouette of my work clothes. Then she looked back at my mother. "That monkey up there," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "has done more work in the last 60 days than most people do in a lifetime. That person is an artist. And frankly, Catherine, I find the sweat of honest labor to be far more fragrant than the scent of desperation." My mother gasped. Affronted. I only meant—" "I know what you meant," Evelyn cut her off. She turned to Serena, who was busy taking a selfie with a piece of exposed rebar, trying to find a flattering angle. "Serena, dear, do be careful. That is a load-bearing tension cable. If you snap it with your purse, the east wall falls down." Serena jumped back, terrified. "Ew, why is everything so dangerous?" "Because building something that lasts is dangerous work," Evelyn said. staring at her future daughter-in-law with a look that I recognized. It was the look of a buyer realizing they had purchased a counterfeit handbag. She was comparing the woman on the scaffolding who saved her home to the girl on the ground who complained about the dust. And the comparison was not in Serena's favor. "Let us move to the terrace," Evelyn said, herding them away. "The air is clearer there." As they walked away, I let out a breath I had been holding for 5 minutes. My father's voice drifted back one last time. "Really, Evelyn, you must get rid of them before the party. We cannot have the help seen by the senator." I watched them leave, a fire burning in my gut that had nothing to do with the welding torch. They were ashamed of me. They were ashamed of the very work that made their luxury possible, but the work was done. 3 days later, the scaffolding came down. The silence that followed was deafening. The glass horizon was no longer just a house. It was a living, breathing entity. The north wall, once a cracking liability, was now a breathtaking vertical jungle. Thousands of rare ferns, mosses, and orchids cascaded down the stone, their roots woven into the custom ceramic mesh I had designed. Water trickled through the system in a mesmerizing, silent cycle, feeding the plants and cooling the air. The structural reinforcements were invisible, hidden beneath the beauty. The house did not look like it was sitting on the cliff. It looked like it had grown out of it. Evelyn stood in the center of the ballroom, staring up at the vaulted ceiling where the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a dappled, cathedral-like effect. She was speechless. "It is," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "It is a miracle. It is engineering," I said. Standing behind her, I had finally taken off the helmet. Though I kept my face partially obscured by the shadows of the late afternoon, Evelyn turned to me. She reached out and took my hands, my rough, scarred, unpolished hands in hers. "You saved us," she said. "You did not just fix the cracks, you gave this house a soul. You are the savior of the Montgomery legacy." "I just did the job," I said, uncomfortable with the praise, yet starving for it. "No," she insisted. "You are family now. I want you front and center at the engagement party. I want to introduce you to the world. I want everyone to know who did this." This was the moment. The trap was set. "I will attend," I said slowly. "But I have one condition." "Anything," Evelyn said. "Name it." "My identity remains a secret until the moment of the reveal," I said. "I want to be introduced only as the creative director of Aetherus Dynamics. No names until I step onto that stage. I want the work to speak for itself before the person does." Evelyn smiled, a conspiratorial glint in her eye. She loved drama. She loved theater. "A mystery guest. The phantom architect. I love it. It will drive the gossip columns wild." "Agreed." She squeezed my hands one last time. "I cannot wait to see you in a dress. Kay? I have a feeling you clean up nicely." "You have no idea," I whispered as I walked away. I drove out of the gates of the glass horizon for the last time as a worker. My truck rattled over the cobblestones. In the rearview mirror, the mansion glowed in the sunset, a fortress of glass and green. My parents were preparing to enter that fortress as royalty. They thought they were the kings and queens of the world, but they forgot one thing. I was the one who built the castle, and on Saturday night, the builder was coming to collect the rent. The week leading up to the engagement ball was a masterclass in the theater of the absurd. While I sat in my minimalist apartment, monitoring the pulse of a $100 million estate on my encrypted tablet, my parents were across town, frantically trying to mortgage their souls to pay for a facade of affluence. It was a tale of two preparations. On one side of the city, in the Winterbourne residence, panic masqueraded as excitement. Through the grapevine of household staff, the cleaning lady, Maria, had a soft spot for me, and whispered secrets over the phone. I learned that my father had quietly taken out a third line of credit on the family home. He had liquidated a significant portion of his retirement portfolio, not to invest in a business or pay off debts, but to purchase a diamond necklace for my mother that cost $45,000. It was a piece of jewelry intended to be worn for exactly 4 hours. A desperate signal flare sent up to the Montgomerys that shouted, "We belong here." They were bleeding money to look like they had money. My mother spent her days in the high-end boutiques of Fifth Avenue, but she did not shop like a wealthy woman. Wealthy women shop with quiet confidence. My mother shopped with frantic desperation. She bought handbags with logos so large they could be seen from space, believing that branding was a substitute for breeding. She scolded sales assistants, demanded champagne, and terrified the tailors with impossible alteration requests for Serena's gown, in the midst of this chaotic spending spree. My phone rang. It was my mother. Her contact photo on my screen was a picture of her smiling at a charity gala I had not been invited to. "Kiara," she said, dispensing with greetings, "I am just calling to remind you of the protocol for this weekend." "Protocol?" I asked, leaning back in my ergonomic chair, watching the real-time humidity readings of the Glass Horizon's atrium stabilize at exactly 60%. "We cannot have any accidental run-ins," she said, her voice tight. "Your father and I are worried that you might try to, I do not know, send a gift, or perhaps show up at the gate to drop off a card. Do not, absolutely do not go within 5 miles of the estate. The security is military grade. They will arrest you, and we will not bail you out." "I have no intention of causing a scene at the gate, Mother," I replied calmly. It was the truth. I would not be at the gate. I would be in the VIP lane. "Good," she snapped. "And if anyone asks, not that they would, because you are irrelevant to their circle. But if by some miracle someone from your high school days asks about Serena's sister, you are out of the country. You are volunteering in, let us say, Peru, digging wells. It fits your dirty aesthetic." "Peru," I repeated. "Got it. We just want Serena to have her moment," she added, her tone shifting to that manipulative softness she used when she wanted to justify her cruelty. "She has worked so hard for this." Serena had never worked a day in her life. She had simply existed beautifully in the path of a rich man. "I understand perfectly," I said. "Enjoy the party." I hung up. The irony was so rich, I could almost taste it. She was terrified I would embarrass them by standing outside the gate. While inside my apartment, a courier was currently knocking on my door with a package that would have made her faint. I opened the door to find a man in a uniformed suit holding a box wrapped in midnight blue velvet. He required a fingerprint scan and a signature before handing it over. I took the box to my kitchen island. It was heavy. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of white silk, was not a cardstock invitation. It was a slab of solid, brushed gold, engraved with laser precision, the Glass Horizon, Private Gala Unveiling, Guest of Honor, K. Access Level Alpha. There was a handwritten note tucked beneath the gold plate. The stationery was heavy, cream-colored, with the Montgomery crest embossed at the top. "To the woman who saved my home, please wear something that makes you feel as powerful as you are. I have seated you at my table. Do not be late. The show cannot start without the director. Evelyn." I ran my thumb over the engraving. My parents had likely received the standard paper invitation, perhaps with silver leaf if they were lucky. They were guests. I was the guest of honor. The difference between us was no longer just a gap. It was a canyon. My preparation for the night was the antithesis of my sister's. Serena had opted for a dress that was an explosion of crystals and tulle, a garment designed to scream. "Look at me." She wanted to be a princess. I went to a small, unmarked atelier in Chelsea, run by a Japanese designer who viewed clothing as architecture for the body. We did not discuss trends. We discussed structure. I chose a gown of liquid charcoal silk, dark as the soil I loved, but cut with a razor-sharp precision that mirrored the steel beams of the Glass Horizon. It had a high neck, long sleeves, and an open back that plunged dangerously low. It was severe, elegant, and intimidating. It was not a dress for a princess. It was a dress for a queen who had built her own kingdom. There were no logos. The quality of the fabric and the complexity of the cut whispered a level of wealth that my parents' flashy brands could never achieve. 2 days before the event, I was at a coffee shop near my parents' neighborhood, safely out of their sight, or so I thought when I overheard a familiar booming voice. My father was holding court at the outdoor table of the bistro next door. He was with two of his neighbors, men he constantly tried to impress with golf scores and stock tips. I pulled my cap down lower and listened. "Oh yes, the wedding is practically a royal affair," my father was saying. His chest puffed out. "The Montgomerys insisted on holding it at the estate. You know, Serena practically designed the renovations herself. She has such an eye for detail. Evelyn Montgomery adores her, says she is the daughter she never had." "That is impressive, Richard," one neighbor said. "And what about your other girl? The quiet one, is she involved?" My father waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Kiara." "Oh, no, she is away. She travels, finds herself. You know how millennials are, no direction. We try to support her. But honestly, Serena is the one carrying the family torch. The estate will basically be ours to manage once they are married. I am already advising Evelyn on some staffing changes." I gripped my coffee cup until the cardboard sleeve crumpled. He was not just hiding me, he was erasing me. And worse, he was taking credit for my work, attributing my genius to Serena, a girl who thought structural engineering was a type of makeup contouring. He was fantasizing about managing an estate he was barely qualified to visit. I left the coffee shop before I did something regretful, like walk over and pour my latte on his Italian loafers. I returned to my sanctuary. My apartment was filled with screens. On my main monitor, I had a live feed of the Glass Horizon's internal systems. I could see the water pressure in the hydroponic walls holding steady at 45 psi. I could see the pH levels of the nutrient delivery system were a perfect 6.5. I could control the ambient lighting, the temperature, and the flow of the waterfalls from my keyboard. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the heartbeat of the venue. My parents thought the party was about the people. They did not realize the building itself was a living participant, and I was its puppeteer. Then, the final absurdity occurred. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on the day of the party. I was applying a hydrating mask, mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. When my personal cell phone rang, it was Serena. I hesitated. I almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. "Hello?" I answered. "Kiara?" Her voice was a high-pitched wail of distress. "You have to help me." "It is an emergency." "I thought I was in Peru," I said dryly. "Shut up. Listen. I am at the hotel near the estate. I was trying on my dress for the final look, and the zipper just popped. The fabric ripped right at the waist. I can't breathe in it, but I have to wear it. It costs $12,000. Call a tailor. Serena. I can't. It is Saturday morning. No one can get here in time. You are crafty. You used to sew your own clothes in high school because you were weird and poor. You know how to fix things. You have to come over. Just sneak in the back, fix it, and leave. Mom and Dad won't even know." I sat there, stunned by the sheer magnitude of her entitlement. She wanted me to drive to the venue I was banned from, sneak in like a servant, fix the dress she would wear to outshine me, and then disappear. She viewed my skills not as a profession, but as a convenience for her survival. "You want me to fix your dress?" I asked slowly. "Yes. Hurry, I will pay you. I will give you, I don't know, $50. Just get here." A laugh escaped me. It was cold and sharp. "Serena, I am not your seamstress. I am not your fix-it girl. And for the record, I did not sew my own clothes because I was poor. I sewed them because I understood construction. Something you clearly know nothing about if you bought a dress that cannot support its own structural integrity." "Kiara, don't you dare. Use a safety pin," I said. "Or better yet, ask your fiancé to buy you a new one. I am busy." "Busy doing what?" "Watching TV," she screamed. "Getting ready," I said. "Ready for what?" "You will see." I hung up and turned the phone off. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The mask had done its job. My skin looked radiant. The hours ticked by. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the city. I began the ritual of transformation. I showered, scrubbing away the last invisible remnants of the gardener. I applied my makeup-sharp eyeliner, a deep crimson lip that looked like a warning label. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, architectural chignon, securing it with a pin made of industrial-grade silver. I stepped into the dress. It slid over my body like a second skin. It was heavy, grounding. When I looked in the full-length mirror, I did not see the girl who had been left behind. I saw a weapon. I put on my heels 4 inches of steel spike. I picked up the gold invitation and slipped it into my clutch. My parents were currently in a limousine, drinking champagne they could not afford, rehearsing their lies, and dreaming of a glory they had not earned. They were heading toward a stage I had built, to perform a play I had already rewritten. They thought they were the main characters. They had no idea that the director was about to walk onto the set and bring the whole house down. I walked out of my apartment and down to the waiting car, not a taxi, but a sleek black sedan sent by Evelyn Montgomery herself. The driver opened the door for me. "To the glass horizon, Ms. Winterbourne?" he asked. "Yes," I said, settling into the leather seat. "Take me home." The tires of the black sedan hummed against the asphalt. A low-frequency vibration that felt like a purring cat against the soles of my shoes. We did not approach the glass horizon through the main gates, where paparazzi blinded arriving guests with a strobe light storm of flashes, and eager valets scrambled to open the doors of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. We took the service road, a winding, tree-lined artery that fed directly into the cliffside, a route known only to staff and the highest tier of security. My driver, a man named Arthur, who had driven Evelyn Montgomery for 20 years, caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He did not ask why I was entering through the back. He did not ask why I was wearing a mask. He simply nodded as he pulled the car into the subterranean VIP garage, a space that looked more like a sterile laboratory than a parking lot. "Ms. Montgomery is waiting for you upstairs," Arthur said as he opened my door. "But she said to take your time. The show is yours to command." I stepped out. The air down here was cool and smelled of ozone and filtered water, the scent of the massive filtration systems I had installed just behind the concrete walls. I walked to the private elevator, my heels clicking a sharp, solitary rhythm on the epoxy floor. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the mask. It was not a frivolous thing of feathers and glitter. It was made of laser-cut black metal, mimicking the intricate vein structure of a decaying leaf. It covered the upper half of my face, leaving my mouth free to smile or to sneer. I pressed the button for the main floor. The elevator ascended smoothly, silently. As the numbers on the display climbed, so did the noise. It started as a murmur, then grew into a roar, the sound of 300 of the wealthiest people on the planet drinking, laughing, and judging one another. The doors slid open. I stepped into the shadows of the mezzanine, a secluded balcony that overlooked the grand atrium. I had designed this vantage point specifically for maintenance, a place to monitor the humidity sensors of the upper canopy. But tonight, it was my royal box. Below me, the glass horizon was singing. It was no longer the broken, cracking shell I had arrived at 3 months ago. It was a cathedral of light and life. The vertical gardens that lined the 30-foot walls were illuminated by hidden amber LEDs, making the ferns and mosses glow as if they were bioluminescent. The waterfalls that cascaded down the structural columns didn't just fall, they danced. Their flow regulated to create a white noise frequency that scientifically lowered human heart rates. The air was crisp, oxygen-rich, and smelled faintly of jasmine and wet stone, a stark contrast to the stifling, perfume-heavy air of most ballrooms. The guests moved through the space like colorful koi fish in a very expensive pond. I saw senators shaking hands with tech moguls. I saw Hollywood royalty clinking glasses with oil tycoons. They were all wearing masks Venetian, geometric, avian turning the gathering into a sea of anonymous luxury. But I did not care about the celebrities. My eyes scanned the crowd for the imposters. It did not take long to find them. Near the center of the room, standing awkwardly close to a massive hydroponic display of rare orchids, was the Winterbourne clan. From this distance, they looked almost convincing. My father, Richard, was wearing a tuxedo that I knew he had rented from a high-end service because he refused to buy one that fit his expanding waistline. He stood with his chest puffed out, holding a glass of scotch with a grip that was too tight, his eyes darting around the room as if he expected security to tap him on the shoulder at any moment. My mother, Catherine, was draped in a silver gown that was slightly too young for her, her neck adorned with the diamond necklace that had cost them their financial security. She was smiling, but it was a brittle, frozen expression, the kind she wore when she was terrified. And then there was Serena. She was wearing a white ball gown, the one with the ripped zipper I had refused to fix. She must have found a tailor, or perhaps she had simply used duct tape and prayer, because she looked seamless. She was laughing at something a young banker was saying, tossing her hair back in a gesture she had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. She looked the part of the future mistress of the estate. I adjusted my mask and moved from the mezzanine to the spiral staircase that descended into the main hall. I moved slowly, letting the fabric of my charcoal silk dress flow behind me like smoke. No one looked at me yet. They were too busy looking at the walls. I reached the bottom of the stairs and slipped into the flow of the party, becoming just another masked figure in the crowd. I drifted closer to my family, using the noise of the waterfalls and the string quartet to mask my approach. I stopped behind a cluster of potted palms, just feet away from where my father was holding court with 2 older men. "Incredible architecture," one of the men said. He was a real estate developer from Chicago, a man known for his ruthlessness. "I have never seen anything like this. The way the load-bearing walls are integrated with the irrigation is genius. Who is the architect?" My father swirled his scotch, looking important. "Oh, you know how Evelyn is. She keeps her cards close to her chest. But I have heard rumors it is a recluse from Milan, an old Italian master, Giovanni something or other, very traditional, but with a modern twist. It does have a European feel," the other man agreed, nodding sagely. "Only an Italian could treat stone with this much romance." I stifled a laugh. An Italian master. They could not conceive that the genius they were worshipping was the same girl they had yelled at for tracking mud onto their carpet. "Well," my father continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "between us, the family had a lot of input. Serena, my daughter, the bride-to-be, she has a natural eye for design. She practically sat with the team every day, guiding the aesthetic. She wanted it to feel organic. This is really her vision coming to life." My stomach turned. The audacity was breathtaking. Serena, who had called the construction site a war zone and complained that the dust was ruining her pores, was now the visionary behind the project. I moved away from them before I lost my composure. I navigated through the crowd, heading toward the main reception area where Evelyn Montgomery was receiving guests. Evelyn looked regal. She was wearing a gown of deep midnight blue velvet, standing tall despite her age. She was shaking hands, nodding, and smiling. But her eyes were restless. She was scanning the room, looking over the shoulders of the billionaires and dukes. She was looking for me. My mother and Serena approached her, flanked by my father. I stopped near a waiter holding a tray of champagne and picked up a glass, watching the interaction like a hawk. "Evelyn," my mother gushed, reaching out to grasp Evelyn's gloved hands. "Everything is simply spectacular. The flowers, the lighting, it is a fairy tale." Evelyn's smile was polite but thin. "I am glad you approve, Catherine. It was a monumental effort." "Oh, we know," Serena chimed in, stepping forward and striking a pose that highlighted her engagement ring. "I was just telling the senator over there how stressful the last few months have been for us, making all these decisions about the greenery and the layout. It is exhausting being a perfectionist, isn't it, Evelyn? Evelyn paused. She looked at Serena with an expression that was hard to read, a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Is that so? Serena? I recall the only decision you made was to complain about the noise of the drills. Serena's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. Oh, you are such a joker. Evelyn, you know what I mean. The emotional labor, keeping everyone inspired. Emotional labor, Evelyn repeated, the words tasting sour in her mouth. She pulled her hands away gently. Well, enjoy the party. I have some matters to attend to. Is everything all right? My father asked, sensing the dismissal. You seem distracted. I am waiting for someone, Evelyn said, her eyes darting past them, sweeping the room again. The most important guest of the evening has not formally announced herself yet. Oh, the senator from New York, my father guessed. He is over by the bar. No, Evelyn said, her voice turning steely. Someone far more important than a senator. Excuse me. She turned her back on them, leaving the Winterbournes standing there, confused and slightly offended. They exchanged glances. She is just stressed, my mother whispered loudly. Weddings are stressful for mothers. She is lucky she has us to handle the social aspect. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. It was time to make my presence known, but not to them, not yet. I walked past my family, close enough that the hem of my silk dress brushed against my father's trousers. He glanced down, annoyed, but when he looked up, he saw only the back of a tall, imposing woman in a mask, radiating an aura of cold authority. He stepped back instinctively, apologizing to my back. He did not recognize his own daughter. I made my way to the edge of the room, where the controls for the lighting system were hidden behind a decorative panel. I had my tablet in my clutch, synchronized to the house's network. The atmosphere in the room was reaching a fever pitch. The music was swelling. The laughter was getting louder. It was a scene of excess and celebration, built on a foundation of lies, both the literal foundation my family ignored and the metaphorical foundation of their social status. I watched Serena move to the center of the dance floor, dragging her fiancé, William, with her. William looked tired. He was a decent man, soft-spoken and kind, but he had been steamrolled by the Winterbourne ambition. He looked around the room with a sense of wonder, touching the leaves of a fern wall with genuine appreciation. Can you believe this place? I heard him ask Serena. It feels alive. Whoever built this, they understand the soul of this land. It is okay, Serena shrugged, checking her reflection in a polished steel beam. A bit too much foliage for my taste. I would have preferred more mirrors, but it will do for the photos. William pulled his hand away from her waist. A subtle rejection that went unnoticed by Serena, who was too busy smiling for a photographer. I leaned against a marble column, the cool stone pressing against my bare back through the opening of my dress. I was the Phantom of the Opera, the ghost in the machine, the monster in the basement. They were celebrating my work while erasing my existence. A waiter passed by, and I placed my empty glass on his tray. He paused, looking at me. He was one of the staff members who had brought me coffee at 4 a.m. when I was covered in mud. He recognized the eyes behind the mask. "Good evening, boss," he whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. "Good evening, Marco," I replied softly. "Is everything holding tight as a drum?" he said. "The lady of the house is asking for you every 5 minutes." "Let her wait," I said, my gaze fixed on my parents, who were now trying to corner a French diplomat. Anticipation makes the reveal sweeter. I looked at the clock on my phone. It was 8:55. The speeches were scheduled for 9 o'clock. 5 minutes. 5 minutes until the masquerade ended and the real faces were shown. My father was laughing loudly at a joke he didn't understand. My mother was critically eyeing the hors d'oeuvres. Serena was preening. They were so confident, so secure in their deception. They thought they had successfully hidden the gardener in the dark. They did not realize that darkness is where things grow. Darkness is where roots take hold. and I had been growing in the dark for a very long time. I tapped the screen of my tablet. The lights in the atrium dimmed imperceptibly, shifting from warm amber to a cooler, more dramatic moonlight blue. The water in the falls slowed, changing the acoustic pitch of the room. The guests quieted down, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The house was responding to me. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of victory. I stepped out from the shadow of the column and began to move toward the stage, a silent predator walking into a pen of oblivious sheep. The game was over. It was time to show them who really held the keys to the castle. The transition from the grand ballroom to the western corridor was like stepping from a riot into a tomb. The air here was cooler, regulated by the localized climate control systems I had calibrated myself just 3 days prior. The roar of the party, the clinking of crystal, the swell of the orchestra, the drone of 1,000 meaningless conversations faded into a dull thrum that vibrated in the floorboards but did not penetrate the silence of the hallway. I moved with a deliberate slowness. My heels struck the polished obsidian floor with a rhythmic, predatory precision. I was not hiding. I was patrolling. A young man in a crisp uniform, one of the senior servers named Elias, approached from the opposite direction carrying a silver tray of empty flutes. He saw me, and for a split second, his professional mask slipped. He did not see a guest. He saw the commander. He stopped, stepped aside, and lowered his head in a gesture of profound respect that bordered on reverence. "Good evening, ma'am," he murmured, keeping his eyes averted. "The humidity in the atrium is holding steady. Carry on." "Elias," I replied softly. My voice was muffled by the mask, but he understood. He hurried past, and I was alone again. It was a heady feeling, walking through this palace of glass and steel, knowing that the invisible army that kept it running answered to me. The security guards stationed at the heavy oak doors leading to the library nodded as I passed. They knew the code names. They knew I was Alpha. They did not know I was the daughter of the desperate man sweating through his tuxedo in the other room. I paused by a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the Hudson River. The water below was a black void, reflecting the lights of the estate like scattered diamonds. I adjusted the strap of my mask. It was tight, digging slightly into my temples, a physical reminder of the barrier between my two lives. Then, the heavy oak door to the library burst open. A man stumbled out, nearly colliding with me. He was moving with a frantic energy, one hand clutching a cell phone, the other running through his thinning hair. The smell of scotch and nervous sweat hit me before he even spoke. It was my father. He pulled up short to avoid crashing into me, his shoes squeaking indignantly on the stone. He looked flushed, his eyes wide and panicked. He had clearly retreated to the hallway to make a phone call he did not want his rich friends to hear. "Oh, pardon me," he gasped, stepping back. He took in my silhouette, the custom charcoal silk gown that pooled around my feet, the severe metal mask, the posture that screamed authority. His irritation instantly morphed into obsequious charm. He assumed, based on the cost of my attire, that I was someone important, perhaps a diplomat's wife or an heiress. "I am so terribly sorry." "Madame," he stammered, putting on his best fake aristocrat accent. "I was just attending to some urgent business. I hope I did not startle you." I stood perfectly still. I looked at him through the mesh of my mask. I saw the broken capillaries in his nose. I saw the desperate hope in his eyes that he hadn't offended a potential connection. He looked small. Pathetic. "It is quite all right." "Richard?" I said. The sound of his name, spoken in my voice, hit him like a physical blow. He froze. The ingratiating smile slid off his face like wet clay. He squinted, his brain struggling to reconcile the visual data with the auditory reality. He leaned in closer, invading my personal space, his eyes searching the darkness behind the metal mask. "Kiara," he whispered. The word came out as a question, trembling with disbelief. "Hello, Father?" I answered, my tone as cold as the river below. The recognition slammed into him. His face went from flushed to a sickly pale in the span of a heartbeat. He did not hug me. He did not ask how I was. He looked around wildly, checking both ends of the corridor to ensure we were alone, when he saw the coast was clear. His fear turned into a vicious, snarling anger. He reached out and grabbed my upper arm. His grip was hard, painful, the grip of a man who was used to controlling things he considered his property. He dragged me backward, away from the window and into the deeper shadows of a recessed alcove, where a marble bust of Julius Caesar stood watching us. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. I pulled my arm away from him with a sharp jerk. I smoothed the silk of my sleeve, looking at him with utter disdain. "I am attending a party," I said calmly. "You are ruining everything," he kept his voice low, a venomous whisper that sprayed spittle. I explicitly told you that you were forbidden to come here. Did you not understand English? Or are you just trying to spite me?" I did not answer. I simply stared at him. "You think this is funny?" he continued, his eyes bulging. "Look at you. Where did you steal that dress? Did you rent it? Did you spend your savings to play dress-up so you could embarrass us in front of the Montgomerys?" "I did not steal it." I said. "You certainly did not buy it." He spat. "You are a gardener. Kiara, you dig in the dirt. You do not wear haute couture. If Evelyn sees you, God. If Serena sees you." "Dad." The voice came from down the hall. We both turned. Serena was walking toward us, her white gown rustling like dry leaves. My mother was right behind her, looking like a silver battleship moving into attack position. "Who are you talking to?" Serena asked, squinting in the dim light. My father stepped aside, revealing me. Serena stopped dead. Her mouth fell open. My mother's eyes narrowed into slits. "Kiara?" my mother asked, her voice dripping with the same disbelief my father had shown. "Oh my God," Serena shrieked. Though she had the presence of mind to keep her volume down, she looked me up and down, her expression twisting into a mix of horror and jealousy. The dress. She recognized the quality of the fabric instantly. It was far superior to hers, and she knew it. "Why are you here?" "You are supposed to be in Peru. We told everyone you were in Peru. I decided to stay in town." I said, "The weather is nicer." "You have to leave," my mother said, stepping forward. Her voice was not hysterical like Serena's. It was cold, practical, and cruel. She moved into my space, her perfume cloying and sweet. "Right now, before anyone sees you, I am not leaving." I said, "You are trespassing." My father growled. He blocked the exit of the alcove, trapping me between his body and the cold stone wall. "This is a private event. The guest list is strictly controlled. You are not on it." "Actually," I said, adjusting a pin in my hair, "I was invited." Serena let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Invited by who?" "The catering staff." "Did they need an extra dishwasher? Is that why you are wearing a mask, so you can scrub plates without anyone knowing you are a winterborn?" They could not comprehend it. Their worldview was so narrow, so defined by their own prejudices, that the idea of me being there as an equal was a physical impossibility to them. To them, I was the help. I would always be the help. "I was invited by the host." I said, "Liar," my mother snapped. "Evelyn Montgomery does not invite landscapers to her son's engagement ball. You are lying, and you are doing a poor job of it. You probably snuck in through the service entrance." "I did come in through the service entrance," I admitted, a small smile playing on my lips. "But not for the reasons you think." "Richard," my mother said, turning to my father, "get rid of her, now. If the senator sees her, if anyone asks who she is, we will be the laughingstock of New York. We cannot have a dirty, unpolished element confusing the narrative." My father turned back to me. His face was a mask of desperate cruelty. "You have 5 minutes," he said, holding up 5 shaking fingers. "You walk out that door, you go to your car, and you drive away. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I will call security." I looked at his hand. I looked at the gold ring on his finger, a ring he had bought on credit. "Security," I repeated. "Yes, Serena chimed in, crossing her arms over her chest. "And the security here is serious. Kiara, they are huge. They will drag you out by your hair if they have to. Imagine how humiliating that would be, being thrown into the street like the trash you are." They were enjoying this. I could see it in their eyes. The fear was still there, yes, but beneath it was a sadistic pleasure. They liked having power over me. They liked reminding me of my place. They were the insiders, the elite, the chosen ones. I was the intruder. My mother checked her diamond watch. 4 minutes. Kiara, tick-tock. I felt a calmness wash over me that was absolute. It was the calmness of a demolition expert watching the timer count down, knowing exactly where the charges were set. They were threatening me with the very weapon I had forged. They were trying to scare the general with his own soldiers. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I looked at Serena. I saw them for what they truly were. Not powerful figures, not parents, not family. They were small, frightened people clinging to a cliff that I was holding up, and they were trying to pry my fingers loose. "You want to call security?" I asked softly. My father pulled his phone out of his pocket. "Do not test me, girl. I have the head of security's number right here. Evelyn gave it to me personally in case of disturbances." He waved the phone in my face like a talisman. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I leaned forward, bringing my masked face inches from his. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and thick, filling the alcove with a suffocating tension. I wanted them to remember this moment. I wanted them to remember the look in my eyes when the ground fell out from under them. "Go ahead," I whispered, my voice steady and clear, cutting through their bluster like a diamond drill through glass. "Call them." My father blinked, taken aback by my lack of fear. "Call them," I repeated, my voice rising just enough to carry the weight of a command. "Call the guards. Have them come here. Have them look at me. And let us see who they listen to." My father's thumb hovered over the screen. He hesitated. For the first time, a seed of doubt planted itself in his mind. It was irrational, impossible, but it was there. Why was I so calm? Why did I look so expensive? Why did I not look like his daughter anymore? "You are bluffing," Serena scoffed, though her voice wavered. "She is just trying to scare you." "Dad, call them." My father pressed the button. He put the phone to his ear. His eyes locked on mine. "Yes. Hello. This is Richard Winterbourne," he said into the phone, his voice shaking. "I have an intruder in the west corridor. A woman. She is refusing to leave. Send a team immediately." He hung up and smiled a grim, triumphant smile. "They are coming." "Good," I said. I folded my arms and leaned back against the marble bust of Caesar. We stood there in the silence of the corridor. My mother began to fix Serena's hair, nervously preening her. My father paced back and forth, muttering to himself about how I was a curse on the family. I checked my internal clock. It would take the security team exactly 45 seconds to reach this location from the central command post. I knew this because I had designed the patrol routes. I counted down in my head. 40, 30. The sound of heavy boots echoed on the stone floor. Fast, disciplined. 20. My family straightened up. They put on their masks of righteous indignation. They were ready to play the victims. They were ready to point the finger and watch me be discarded. 10. The security team rounded the corner. 4 men, massive, dressed in tactical black suits with earpieces. They moved with the efficiency of a SWAT team. My father stepped forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. "There she is," he shouted. "That is the intruder. Remove her from the premises immediately." The lead guard, a man named Marcus, who was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and stone, marched toward us. He looked at my father, he looked at my mother, and then he looked at me. He stopped 3 feet away. My father smirked. "Goodbye. Kiara." Marcus ignored my father completely. He snapped his heels together. He squared his shoulders, and then, in front of my stunned family, he bowed his head to me. "Target acquired." "Ma'am," Marcus said to me, his voice respectful and awaiting orders, "are these guests bothering you?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was the sound of a world shattering. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother clutched her necklace as if she were having a heart attack. Serena looked from the guard to me and back again, her brain unable to process the data. I pushed off the wall and stood to my full height. I looked down at my father, who was now trembling for a very different reason. "I told you, Father," I said, my voice smooth as silk, "you really should be careful who you try to throw out of their own house." I turned to Marcus. "Escort them back to the party, Marcus, and keep an eye on them. I do not want them breaking anything. They can be clumsy." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. He turned to my father, his demeanor shifting from deferential to imposing. "Mr. Winterbourne, if you would please follow me. The main hall is that way." I did not wait for their reaction. I turned on my heel and walked away, back toward the music and the light, leaving them standing in the shadows of the corridor, staring at my back as if they had just seen a ghost. And in a way, they had. They had seen the ghost of the daughter they thought they could bury, rising up to rule the world they so desperately wanted to be part of. The game was no longer hide and seek. The hunter had just become the prey. I remained in the shadows of the mezzanine, a silent gargoyle perched above the sea of diamonds and deceit. From my vantage point, I watched the doors to the main ballroom swing open. My family walked back in. They did not look like people who had just been threatened with expulsion. They did not look like people who had just seen a security guard bow to their disgraced daughter. The human mind is a fascinating instrument of survival. When faced with a reality that destroys its worldview, it simply rewrites the script. I could practically hear the gears turning in my father's head, grinding out a new narrative to protect his fragile ego. He was straightening his tuxedo jacket, a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. He leaned in to whisper something to my mother, and she let out a breathy, relieved laugh. Patting his arm, they had convinced themselves that the security guard's deference to me had been a mockery. In their twisted version of events, Marcus had been humoring the crazy woman, playing along with my delusion to keep me calm before throwing me out into the street. They believed I was currently being tossed into the back of a police cruiser, while they, the victors, returned to the champagne and the glory. They walked with a renewed, sickening confidence. They believed they had successfully excised the tumor from the evening. Serena was the worst of them. She glided through the crowd, her white dress billowing around her. She had recovered from her panic in the hallway with terrifying speed. Now, she was playing the role of the tragic heroine who had just survived an ordeal. I watched her approach a group of bridesmaids, clutching her chest, undoubtedly spinning a tale about a crazy fan or a disgruntled servant she had just bravely confronted. I adjusted the earpiece hidden beneath my hair. "Lighting Q4 in 2 minutes," I whispered. "Copy that. Alpha," came from the voice of the lighting director from the control booth. I watched my parents navigate the room. They were heading toward the front, positioning themselves near the stage. They wanted to be visible. They wanted to be ready. They were so certain that tonight was about them. My father was practically vibrating with anticipation. He checked his watch. He checked his tie. He looked around the room with a proprietary air, as if he were already calculating the resale value of the art on the walls. The music began to change. The string quartet transitioned from a light waltz to a swelling, dramatic symphony. The ambient noise of the waterfalls softened as the flow was restricted by 10%, a subtle acoustic trick I had programmed to draw attention to the center of the room without anyone realizing why they were suddenly listening. The lights in the vast atrium dimmed slowly. The golden glow of the vertical gardens deepened into a twilight blue. A single beam of pure white light cut through the darkness, illuminating the center of the stage. Evelyn Montgomery stepped into the light. She was magnificent. In her midnight blue velvet gown, she looked like a queen addressing her court. The room fell silent. 300 of the world's most powerful people stopped talking, stopped drinking, and turned to face her. My family stood in the front row. Just off to the left, my father puffed out his chest so far I thought the buttons of his shirt might become lethal projectiles. My mother fixed a smile on her face that was equal parts hunger and pride. Serena linked her arm through William's, leaning her head on his shoulder, performing the picture-perfect image of the devoted fiancé. "Welcome," Evelyn's voice rang out, amplified by the hidden acoustic panels I had embedded in the fern walls. Her voice was steady, lacking the tremor of stress she had carried for months. "Welcome to the glass horizon." Applause rippled through the room. My father clapped the loudest, lifting his hands high so everyone could see his enthusiasm. "Tonight is a celebration of union." Evelyn continued, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. She did not look at the notes in her hand. She spoke from the heart. "We are here to celebrate the engagement of my son, William, to Serena Winterbourne." The spotlight widened to include Serena and William. Serena beamed, executing a practiced curtsy that was slightly too theatrical for the setting. My mother dabbed at a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. They absorbed the applause like sponges soaking up water. They thought this was it. They thought the speech was about them. But Evelyn did not invite them up. She did not ask them to speak. Instead, she took a step forward, and the spotlight narrowed back onto her alone. "However," Evelyn said, her tone shifting, it became heavier, more serious. "A celebration of the future is impossible without acknowledging the foundation upon which we stand, and I mean that quite literally." The room went deadly quiet. "Many of you know the history of the Montgomery family," she said, pacing slowly across the stage. "You know our triumphs, you know our business, but very few of you know that 3 months ago, this house, this symbol of our legacy, was dying." My father frowned slightly. This was not the script he had expected. He wanted toasts and compliments, not a structural engineering report. He leaned toward my mother, whispering something out of the corner of his mouth. The earth beneath us was shifting. Evelyn declared. "The cracks were deep. The experts told me it was over. They told me to evacuate. They told me that the glass horizon was destined to slide into the Hudson River." A gasp went through the crowd. This was news to them. The Montgomerys never showed weakness. To admit vulnerability so publicly was shocking. "I was desperate," Evelyn admitted. "I was ready to cancel this evening. I was ready to admit defeat. But then I found a solution. Or rather, the solution found me." Serena squeezed William's arm. I could see her lips moving. She was whispering to him. She was probably claiming that she had been the one to encourage Evelyn not to give up. She was trying to attach herself to the narrative of resilience. "I hired a firm called Aetherus Dynamics," Evelyn said, "and they sent me a director. A visionary, a person who looked at a disaster and saw a canvas." My father nodded knowingly to the man standing next to him. He tapped his nose and mouthed the words, "The Italian." "They worked in the mud," Evelyn continued, her voice rising with emotion. "They worked in the rain. They worked while we slept. They did not just patch the cracks. They reimagined the entire relationship between this structure and the earth. Look around you." She gestured to the walls. "These gardens are not decoration. They are the muscles holding this house together. The water you hear is not just ambient sound. It is the lifeblood of a hydraulic counterweight system that defies gravity. This house is standing tonight because of the genius of one single individual. My family was practically hyperventilating. They were so deluded, so drunk on their own self-importance, that they believed Evelyn was talking about their consultation. They believed that Serena's vague suggestions about more plants had somehow translated into this engineering marvel." My father nudged my mother. "Get ready." He whispered loudly enough for the microphone to pick up a faint murmur. "She is going to call us up. Fix your necklace." Serena smoothed her dress. She unlinked her arm from William's, preparing to walk up the stairs to the stage. She wore a look of faux humility, practicing her surprised face. I stood on the mezzanine, my hand resting on the cold railing. It was fascinating to watch. It was like watching a group of people walk off a cliff because they were too busy looking at themselves in a mirror to see the edge. "I want to dedicate this night," Evelyn said, her voice booming. "Not to my son, not to his fiancée, but to the person who saved the Montgomery legacy." Serena took a half step forward. She was actually doing it. She was stepping out of the line, ready to accept the applause for a job she hadn't done. I instructed the lighting booth to cut the house lights completely. The room plunged into total darkness. The only light came from the faint, bioluminescent glow of the plants on the walls. A hush of confusion and excitement swept through the guests. My father's voice cut through the dark. A harsh whisper. "What is happening? Is this part of the show?" "Just keep smiling, Catherine." Then, the spotlight snapped back on, but it was not on the stage. It began to sweep across the room. A tight, blinding beam of white light, searching the crowd like the eye of God. It moved over the faces of billionaires, over the confused expressions of the Winterborns, over the waiting face of Serena, who stood frozen with one foot forward. The light did not stop on them. It passed them by as if they were invisible. "It is probably the Italian architect," my father whispered frantically to my mother. "Giovanni, remember, just clap loud. We will go up after him." The beam of light climbed. It moved up the wall. It swept across the balcony. And then it hit me. I stood alone on the mezzanine, bathed in the brilliant white glare. The metal mask on my face glinted like black chrome. The charcoal silk of my dress swallowed the light, making me look like a silhouette cut from the night sky. I did not flinch. I did not wave. I stood with my hands clasping the railing, looking down at them like a judge on a high bench. The entire room turned. 300 faces looked up. Evelyn's voice rang out from the darkness of the stage, triumphant and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I give you the creative director of Aetherus Dynamics, the savior of the glass horizon, the genius behind the mask." My father squinted into the light. He shielded his eyes with his hand. He could not see my face, only the figure. "Who is that?" he hissed. "That is not an Italian man. It is a woman," my mother whispered, her voice trembling with a sudden, inexplicable dread. "Look at that dress." "Richard." Serena stared up at me. Her mouth was open. She recognized the silhouette. She recognized the posture, but her brain refused to accept it. It was a cognitive dissonance so violent it nearly knocked her over. "No," she breathed. "It can't be." Evelyn continued, her voice filled with a warmth that she had never shown to Serena. She asked to remain anonymous until the work was done. She asked for no credit until the foundation was secure. But tonight, the house is safe. And it is time for the world to know her name. I reached up. My fingers found the clasp of the metal mask. The room held its breath. The silence was absolute. I could hear the waterfall. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My father was still muttering, "It is some hireling, some actor. Why is she up there?" I undid the clasp. I pulled the mask away from my face. I let it drop. It hit the floor of the mezzanine with a loud, ringing clang that echoed through the silent hall. I looked down. I locked eyes with my father. I locked eyes with my mother. I locked eyes with my sister. And then, I smiled. It was the same smile I had worn when Marcus bowed to me. A smile of absolute, terrifying victory. Evelyn spoke the words that would end their world. "Please welcome Ms. Kiara Winterborn." The name hung in the air like the smoke after an explosion. Kiara Winterborn. It did not just echo. It reverberated, bouncing off the glass walls and the steel beams I had designed, amplifying in the silence until it was the only thing in the universe. For 3 seconds, the room was absolutely still. It was a vacuum of shock, but in the front row, time didn't just stop. It shattered. I looked down at my family from the height of the mezzanine. The blood had drained from my father's face so rapidly that his skin looked like wet ash. His mouth was open, forming a silent, gaping O of incomprehension. He blinked rapidly, his brain misfiring, unable to bridge the gap between the gardener he had threatened to arrest 10 minutes ago and the savior being heralded by the most powerful woman in New York. My mother was worse. She had stopped breathing. Her hand was frozen halfway to her throat, clutching the diamond necklace that they had gone into debt to buy. A necklace that now looked like a cheap trinket compared to the authority radiating from me. She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, the way a prey animal stares at a predator that has just broken cover, and Serena, my beautiful, cruel sister. She looked as if someone had physically slapped her. Her perfect posture collapsed. Her head jerked back, her eyes darting between me and Evelyn, desperate for this to be a joke, a mistake, a hallucination. She mouthed the word no over and over again, a silent mantra of denial. Then, the silence broke. It started with a single clap from the back of the room, likely Marco, the waiter, then another, then a roar. The applause did not trickle in. It erupted. It swept through the room like a tidal wave, a thunderous ovation from 300 people who understood power and talent. I moved. I walked to the top of the spiral staircase. The spotlight stayed on me, blindingly white, hot against my skin. I did not look down at my feet. I descended the stairs with the muscle memory of a woman who had climbed scaffolding in a gale. Every step was a declaration. I am here. I am real. I am the architect. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the crowd parted for me. These were billionaires, senators, and icons. Yet they stepped back to create a wide aisle, their applause intensifying as I passed. I saw respect in their eyes. I saw awe. For the first time in my life, I was not invisible. I was the sun, and they were caught in my gravity. I walked past my family. I did not stop. I did not acknowledge them, but I felt their presence like a cold draft. I felt my father's desperation radiating off him like heat. I heard my mother let out a strangled gasp as the hem of my charcoal silk dress brushed against the floor, inches from her shoes. I was close enough to smell the fear on them. They were shrinking, physically diminishing in the presence of my ascent. I stepped onto the stage. Evelyn Montgomery was waiting for me. She did not offer me a polite handshake. She opened her arms. In front of the flashbulbs, in front of the elite, in front of my trembling parents, the matriarch of the Montgomery dynasty embraced me like a daughter. It was warm, genuine, and devastatingly public. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evelyn said into the microphone, her voice trembling with emotion, "I told you I hired a firm, but what I got was a partner." She pulled back, keeping her arm draped protectively around my shoulders. She looked out at the audience, her eyes shining. "When everyone else told me to abandon this house, Kiara Winterbourne told me to listen to it. She spent 90 days in the mud, in the dark, fighting to save a legacy that was not even her own. She is not just an architect, she is a visionary." The applause surged again, louder this time. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the Chicago developer nodding approvingly. I saw the senator clapping enthusiastically. And then, I saw my father. He was looking around the room, frantic. He was grabbing the arm of the man next to him, a board member of a major bank, and pointing at me, mouthing, "That is my daughter. That is my girl." He was trying to pivot. He was trying to claim me. He was trying to ride the wave he had tried to drown me in. But the board member pulled his arm away, looking at my father with confusion and distaste. The narrative was not holding. Evelyn raised her hand for silence. The room obeyed instantly. "There is one more thing," Evelyn said, turning to look at me, a mischievous glint in her eye. "When we discussed compensation for this project, I offered Ms. Winterbourne a fee that would have been substantial. A blank check, essentially." My mother's ears perked up. I saw her eyes widen. She was calculating. She was thinking about the money. She was thinking that perhaps, just perhaps, they could still control me. If I had cash, they could guilt me into sharing it. They could use familial duty to drain me dry. "But," Evelyn continued, her voice ringing clear as a bell, "Kiara refused the money." My father's face fell. My mother looked horrified. Refused to them. Refusing money was a sin. "Instead," Evelyn said, "she asked for something else. She bet on herself. She bet on this house, in exchange for her work, and for the proprietary technology she installed in these walls. Kiara Winterbourne has accepted a 20% equity stake in the Glass Horizon estate and the surrounding commercial holdings. The gasp that went through the room sucked the oxygen out of the air. 20%. It was a fortune. It was generational wealth. But more than that, it was ownership. My father's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the shoulder of the person in front of him to stay upright. I saw the math crashing through his mind. I did not just work here. I owned a fifth of the building. I was not the gardener. I was the landlord. This meant that if Serena married William, she would be living in a house that I partially owned. Every time she walked down a hallway, she would be walking on my investment. Every party she threw would be at my discretion. She is not just the architect, Evelyn declared, delivering the final blow. She is my partner, and she is the future of this estate. The applause that followed was deafening, but I was focused on the front row. The crowd had started to notice the Winterbourne's reaction. It is hard to hide terror in a spotlight. "Isn't that her family?" a woman in emerald satin whispered loudly, just a few feet away from my mother. "Why do they look so shocked?" "I heard the father earlier," a man replied, his voice carrying in a lull. "He said the architect was an old Italian man. He didn't even know it was his own daughter." "How is that possible?" another voice chimed in. "Do they not talk? Look at them. They look like they have seen a ghost." "Maybe they are estranged," the woman speculated, eyeing my mother's frozen expression. "Or maybe they are just negligent. Imagine not knowing your daughter is a genius." The whispers spread like wildfire. The elite of New York thrives on scandal. And this was delicious. The Winterbournes, who had spent the evening bragging and posturing, were being exposed as frauds in real time. They were not the proud parents of a prodigy. They were the oblivious fools who had ignored her. My father turned red, then purple. He could feel the judgment of the room turning against him. He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. He waved weakly at me, a pathetic, begging gesture, and then the universe delivered its final punchline. Serena was standing next to William. She was shaking. Her entire identity the golden child, the prize, the future mistress of the manor was dissolving. She looked at me standing on the stage, bathed in light, holding Evelyn's hand. She looked at the crowd worshipping me. She looked at William, her fiancé. William was not looking at me. He was looking at her. And the expression on his face was not love. It was dawning horror. He was remembering every lie. He was remembering Serena complaining about the dust. He was remembering her taking credit for the design. He was remembering her mocking the workers. He was realizing that the woman he was about to marry was a hollow shell, painted gold but empty inside. "You didn't know?" William asked, his voice cutting through the applause, audible only to the front row, but loud enough for Serena. "You told me you helped design the gardens. You told me you worked with the team." I, Serena stammered, her eyes wild. "I meant I gave inspiration." "You didn't know your own sister was the architect?" William asked. Stepping back from her, Serena flinched. Her hand, clutching a glass of heavy, dark red Cabernet, spasmed. The glass slipped. It seemed to fall in slow motion. It hit the floor right at the hem of her dress. But it didn't just break. It exploded. The red wine splashed upward, a violent crimson geyser. It hit the pristine white silk of her ball gown. The stain spread instantly. It soaked into the expensive fabric, turning the bottom half of her dress into a bloody, jagged mess. It looked like a wound. It looked like mud. Serena shrieked. It was a high, piercing sound that cut through the applause and silenced the room. She looked down at her dress, at the ruin of her perfection. She tried to brush it off, but her hands just smeared the red wine further, staining her gloves, staining her skin. She looked up, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black streaks. She looked like a disaster. She looked like the muddy disgrace she had always called me. I stood on the stage, immaculate in my charcoal silk, untouched and untouchable. The contrast was brutal. I was the queen in the tower. She was the mess on the floor. "Oh, dear," Evelyn said into the microphone, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. It seems we have had a spill. Someone please get a towel for the guest. The guest. Not my future daughter-in-law. Not the bride. Just the guest. William stared at the stain on Serena's dress. He looked at her frantically scrubbing at it, caring more about the silk than the humiliation of her family. He looked up at me, then at my parents, who were now arguing in hushed, angry tones, blaming each other. He took another step back. It was a small step, but it crossed a continent. "I think," William said, his voice flat and resolved, "that I need some air." "William, wait," Serena cried, reaching out with a wine-stained hand. "It is just a dress, I can fix it." He looked at her hand, the hand that had never done a day's work, now covered in the evidence of her clumsiness. "It is not about the dress, Serena," he said quietly. He turned and walked away. He walked through the crowd, heading toward the terrace doors. He did not look back. Serena stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by whispered pity and open scorn. The spotlight was still on the stage, on me. I looked down at her one last time. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of closure. The scales had balanced. I turned to Evelyn. "Shall we continue the tour?" I asked. My voice amplified for everyone to hear. "I believe the guests are dying to see the filtration systems." Evelyn laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Lead the way, partner." We walked off the stage together, leaving the Winterbournes in the dark, stained and shattered, while the rest of the world followed me into the light. The hush that fell over the room following Serena's humiliating accident was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The only sound remaining was the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the artificial waterfalls I had engineered to mimic the human heartbeat. It was ironic that the house I built had a steady pulse, while the family that raised me seemed to have gone into cardiac arrest. Evelyn Montgomery did not rush to comfort the sobbing woman in the wine-stained dress. Instead, she turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and a silent request. She handed me the microphone. It was a heavy, wireless device, cold against my palm. It felt less like a tool for amplification and more like a gavel. I stepped forward to the edge of the stage. The spotlight was still blindingly white, creating a wall of light between me and the darkness where my family stood. I could see them clearly, though my father was mopping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. My mother was clutching her purse as if it contained the last remnants of her dignity. Serena was staring at the floor, the red stain on her white dress spreading like a map of her failures. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The acoustic design of the atrium meant that even a whisper would carry to the furthest corner of the room. "I have been told," I began, my voice steady and devoid of the anger they expected, "that a house is only as strong as its foundation. For 29 years, I believed that my foundation was flawed. I was told that I was too rough, too dirty, and too unpolished to stand in the light." I looked directly at my parents. They flinched, physically recoiling as if I had thrown a stone at them. "But tonight," I continued, "I want to offer a word of gratitude, not to the mentors who taught me engineering, and not to the universities that gave me degrees. I want to thank my parents, Richard and Catherine Winterbourne." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. My father straightened up slightly, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was going to save them, to spin a story about how their tough love had made me a genius. He took a half step forward, ready to accept the praise. "Thank you," I said, leaning slightly into the light, "for hiding me. Thank you for keeping me in the shadows. Thank you for excluding me from your parties, your vacations, and your carefully curated life." My father stopped. The hope died instantly, replaced by a gray dread. "Because in those shadows," I said, my voice hardening into steel, "I found the earth. While you were teaching my sister how to hold a champagne flute, I was learning how to hold up a building. While you were worried about the cleanliness of your shoes, I was learning that mud is the material of creation, Your neglect was the greatest gift you could have ever given me. It gave me the silence I needed to build a world where your approval is utterly irrelevant." I paused, letting the words sink into their skin like acid. "You taught me that I did not need a lineage to be elite," I said. "You taught me that value is not inherited, it is built, it is forged. And standing here tonight, looking at this estate that would have crumbled without my hands, I realize that I am not the embarrassment of the Winterbourne family. I am its only reality." The room erupted. It was not polite applause. It was a guttural, emotional roar of approval from the crowd. They loved a story of triumph, and I had just given them a masterpiece. My mother let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. My father looked around, desperate for an ally, but every face he saw was turned away, cold and judging. Evelyn stepped up beside me. She took the microphone back, her movements sharp and decisive. She looked down at my parents with the cold calculation of a woman who had survived 40 years on Wall Street. "Richard, Catherine," Evelyn said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a guillotine. "You were given a diamond in the rough, a rare, priceless gem, and instead of polishing it, you treated it like common gravel. You tried to bury it because you lacked the vision to see its worth." She paused, letting her gaze drift to Serena, who was still weeping silently, a broken doll in a ruined dress. "This lack of judgment," Evelyn said, her tone icy, "is concerning in business. When a partner fails to recognize the value of their own assets, we call it incompetence. In a family, I believe we call it a tragedy. But frankly, it makes me question the viability of any merger between our two houses." The word merger hung in the air, a business term used to describe the marriage. It was a brutal reminder that to the Montgomerys, this wedding was a contract. And that contract was about to be voided. William, who had been standing near the terrace doors, walked back into the light. He did not go to Serena. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked up at his mother, then at me. He turned his back to the room, facing the stage, effectively turning his back on Serena. It was a silent, devastating gesture. He was aligning himself with the builders, not the pretenders. "William," Serena whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, it was just a misunderstanding. We wanted to surprise you. We wanted Kiara to have her big moment without us interfering." My father latched onto this lie like a drowning man grabbing a piece of driftwood. "Yes," he shouted, trying to force a laugh that sounded like a bark. "Exactly. It was a surprise. We knew. We always knew. We just wanted to give her the spotlight." "Evelyn, surely you understand a little theatrical flair." He started to rush toward the stage, his arms wide, trying to force a hug, trying to physically bridge the gap between his failure and my success. My mother followed him, composing her face into a mask of maternal pride, ready to claim credit for my speech. "Stay back," I said calmly. They did not listen. They hit the bottom of the stairs, their eyes fixed on the stage, as if it were a lifeboat. "Security," Evelyn said. She did not shout. She simply spoke the word. From the shadows of the wings, 4 figures emerged. It was Marcus and his team, the same men my father had threatened to call on me just an hour ago. They moved with a speed that was terrifying. They formed a human wall at the base of the stairs, blocking my parents' path. "Mr. Winterbourne," Marcus said, his voice deep and unyielding. "Please step back. You are encroaching on the VIP area. Get out of my way." My father sputtered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "That is my daughter. I have a right to congratulate her. I am the father of the architect." "You are a guest," Marcus corrected him, his hand resting heavily on my father's chest, pushing him back. "And your invitation has been revoked." "Revoked?" my mother shrieked. "You cannot do this. Serena is the bride." I looked at William. He did not move. He did not defend them. He simply looked at the floor, shaking his head. "Escort them out," Evelyn commanded. "And help Ms. Winterbourne the younger one find a taxi. I do not want that wine stain on my upholstery. The guards moved in. It was swift and professional. My father was physically turned around. My mother was guided by the elbow, protesting shrilly. Serena was helped up, sobbing, forced to walk past the hundreds of guests who were now staring at her with open pity. I watched them go. I watched the backs of the people who had defined my life for so long. I watched them shrink until they were just small, noisy figures disappearing through the heavy oak doors. I felt light, the weight I had been carrying for 29 years. The weight of their judgment, their expectations, their shame, vanished. It evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Evelyn put her hand on my shoulder. "They are gone," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "They are—" Evelyn turned back to the crowd, her energy shifting instantly back to business. She was not a woman to dwell on the past. "Now," she announced, her voice booming with excitement. "Let us put this unpleasantness behind us. We have a future to build. I am thrilled to announce that Aetherist Dynamics, under the leadership of Kiara Winterbourne, has just signed an exclusive contract with the Montgomery Group." A murmur of excitement went through the room. "We are not just stopping at this estate," Evelyn declared. "Starting next month, Kiara will be spearheading the complete ecological revitalization of our entire global chain of luxury resorts, from the Maldives to Aspen. She will be redesigning the way the world experiences luxury. She is not just saving our homes, she is redefining our brand." The applause this time was for the future. It was for the business. It was for the millions of dollars in contracts that had just been confirmed. I looked out at the crowd one last time. I saw the envy in their eyes. I saw the admiration. I was no longer the girl in the mud. I was a titan. I turned and walked off the stage, Evelyn by my side. I walked through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, nodding at the offers of champagne. I moved with the grace of a woman who owns the floor she walks on. I made my way to the private elevator, the one that led to the roof. I needed a moment. The elevator ride was silent and swift. When the doors opened, the wind hit me. It was a cold, crisp wind coming off the Hudson, carrying the scent of pine and water. I walked out onto the highest balcony of the glass horizon. From here, the world looked like a toy set. The cars leaving the estate were just strings of red lights. I could see the limo that carried my family, a small black beetle crawling away into the darkness, carrying its cargo of broken dreams and debt. I walked to the edge of the railing. I placed my hands on the cold steel. I could feel the vibration of the house beneath me, the hum of the systems I had built. The house was alive. It was breathing, and it answered to me. A waiter appeared silently behind me. It was Marco. He held a silver tray with a single crystal flute of vintage champagne, the good stuff, the kind they saved for kings. "For the architect," he said with a smile. I took the glass. "Thank you, Marco." He bowed and retreated, leaving me alone with the night. I looked down at the party below, at the glow of the vertical gardens, at the masterpiece I had created. I thought about the little girl who used to play in the dirt, the girl who was told she would never be enough. I raised the glass to the moon. "To the gardener," I whispered to the wind. I took a sip. It tasted like stars. I didn't need their name. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apology. I had built my own name, brick by brick, root by root. And standing there, on top of the world I had engineered, I knew one thing for certain: the view is always better when you build the mountain yourself. Thank you so much for listening to this story of resilience and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Kiara's journey. And do not forget to subscribe to the Sunday Drama Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share more powerful stories with the world.